on a horse farm in Peculiar, just a few minutes from a town called Liberty. So I think fighting for freedom was my destiny.
Hey guys, Cliff Maloney serves as the president at Young Americans for Liberty. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And a fun fact, in college, to pay for books, I dressed up as Buzz Lightyear for kids' birthday parties.
I'm Dan Bongino, host of the And fun fact is, I am the first panelist in Politicon history to have a moderator tell him to shut the fuck up. That's right. Fun fact. That's true.
Dan, it may happen again. It will not.
Hi, I'm Lahren Chen. I host Roaming Millennial Uncensored on CRTV. I also have a YouTube channel under the same name. I'm from Montreal and Hong Kong. And fun fact about me, I went to Disneyland on Friday. So be jealous.
Tomi Lahren. I'm originally from Rapid City, South Dakota. I live here behind enemy lines in Los Angeles, California now. I work for Fox News, and I'm going to be on a new platform that guy is going to be on as well called Fox Nation. So if you haven't heard of it, please go and hear about it because it's going to be a streaming service for the Fox News superfan. You guys are going to love it. Interesting fact about me, some of you might know this if you follow me on Instagram, but my favorite rapper is 21 Savage, and I so desperately would like to meet him in the next year.
So let's just begin with an opening premise, which is, if you look at the description of our panel, it's the suggestion that our rights are under attack, potentially, from the media, from campus leftists, etc. Do you believe the situation is as dire as some people suggest? And what specifically, if so, are you most concerned about? So let's start at the end with the ladies. What do you think?
Do I think it's as dire as it seems? I think that we are less divided as a country than the media and social media would have you believe. However, it is certainly a problem, and I think that with young people on college campuses, it's the biggest problem because that's where they're learning how to be adults and going into the workforce. So that polarization or that inability to be themselves or to have conservative thought is being challenged. But to me, the way to solve that isn't just getting rid of liberal professors or even calling out liberal professors. It's about parents and friends teaching each other and having confidence enough to speak their mind and to be conservative. And if you bring that with you to college, it doesn't matter how liberal your professor is, you're going to be conservative and maintain your values.
I agree with Tomi that the majority of the country aren't nearly as polarized as watching MSNBC would have us believe, but I think our rights very much are under attack. I think rights that we don't really talk about often are being attacked. I think the rights of the American citizenry to control their borders, which I think is a right, that's being attacked. I think the rights of parents to be able to say, no, I don't want my children learning about some sort of transgender indoctrination at school, that's under attack. The rights of the I mean, your rights are being attacked, but thankfully it's from a, I would say, small yet vocal minority.
You know, Guy, I'd say there are actual examples of it happening. I mean, any of us can, talk about it like we do, but there are tangible, material, and touchable examples. I mean, look at the First Amendment on college campuses, where we've had things like free speech. I mean, if you've been to a Shapiro speech, you have to wear like chainmail at the speech to avoid getting assaulted. The Second Amendment, I lived in Maryland and New York. Those are may-issue states, meaning what? They may enforce the Second Amendment. I mean, that's the very definition of may-issue status. So you don't have Second Amendment rights if the government is the arbiter of who gets them or doesn't. And then finally, your Fourth Amendment rights. I mean, think about it. What is metadata collection? I mean, they can't even tell the truth about it, right? Remember Jim Clapper? Not wittingly. Are you collecting on everything? Of course they were collecting on all of you. So there are actual examples of this happening. And I only bring that up, Guy, because you know the left. Anytime you say something without backing it up, you're a conspiracy theorist. But the left does that to us all the time when they say things without backing it up.
Do you guys think that, because I think if you had a panel of leftist center folks and leftists up here, and you asked them the same question, are our rights under attack, they would all answer yes. Right? But for different reasons. They'd say, Under the Trump administration and the courts, we're worried about Roe versus Wade. We're worried about Obergefell and gay marriage. We're worried about, so the list goes on, voting rights, right? They're concerned about voter suppression is what they would call it. Is that part of the intense current polarization that we're experiencing? Because both sides, in their minds, have legitimate claims to being under fundamental freedoms that they care about under assault, or at least that perception.
Well, we get the government that we vote for, and we get the media that we pay for. Part of the problem is that we pay nothing for our media to cover this, right? It's advertising, a third party that necessarily intervenes. Some people are being censored on major media platforms. I think the biggest threat to freedom is actually coming from the marketplace more than government. As a libertarian, I think that social media institutions are in many respects undermining our democratic processes. And while I believe that Facebook and Twitter and all of these social media sites are private institutions, they should be able to set the rules on their own platforms. It troubles me, despite the fact that I don't care for Alex Jones, it troubles me to see these media agencies conspiring to deplatform him, because while I was running for federal office, I was deplatformed multiple times. And it all begins the same way. You have a leftist mob who gets upset with something that you say, and then they all come and they move mass report and have you removed, right? So one of the biggest problems that I saw in the campaign last year, just meeting with regular people, is that most people, unfortunately, want freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. A lot of people would say, one person asked me, he's like, I will only support you if you vote to ban the religion of Islam. And despite my problems with Islam, I had to say,
we have a constitution.
Shall make no law that prevents me from doing that. Right, but politicians, of course, are going to say whatever it takes to get elected, right? So unfortunately, our electorate is not quite interested in the ideas of free speech or freedom. We like freedom for ourselves. It's the NPCs on the left versus the NPCs on the right, the populist left and the populist right, and many of them are caught up in cult of personalities, so they do whatever their leader says, whoever it is that they're listening to at the time. Independent thinking is rare.
Cliff, let me just pick up on that, because as a libertarian, how do you or we deal with the exact problem that Austin just mentioned, which is these large tech companies are private companies. And as conservatives, the government interfering is anathema, right? But if they are sort of, in some ways, the gatekeepers to our modern discourse, if they are putting their thumb on the scale and playing favorites, is there a role for government? If not, what can be done organically to try to fix that?
Yeah, I definitely don't think there is a role. I think that there needs to be alternatives, and people need to create those. What are those platforms? And I think that the way to keep Facebook or big tech in check is to have honest conversations and call them out when they claim to be for free speech, and they're obviously shunning or shutting down or shadow banning certain people that believe certain things. But the problem that I want to get back to that you first said was, would the left say the same thing about people, losing their rights? And I think that the hysteria of the left and some on the right, this polarization of just everything is emotion, everything is, they are trying to shut us down. They are trying to, it's not human to treat somebody or to believe the beliefs you believe. That
Hillary Clinton just said, you can't be civil. This is not a cheap shot. She said you can't be civil with people who are trying to destroy what you believe, and I think that encapsulates a lot of what partisans believe.
Look at the Trump baby balloon. It's okay to poke fun at the right, but the problem is that you're on the left, you're all protected classes. So if we flew an Elizabeth Warren Native American baby balloon over Politicon, baby Pocahontas, well then all of a sudden the victim complex, the victim Olympics would be competing. Right?
Except that wouldn't really be offensive or racist toward her, because she's not a Native American. She just isn't, and that's not me saying that, that's the Cherokee Nation saying that.
It's whatever you identify with these days.
Tomi, what do you think of the problem of sort of echo chambers? I know you mentioned this earlier here at Politicon. It is a problem that I think we all recognize, and yet, you and I, so we work at Fox, right? So he would say we are part of the echo chamber problem. We preach to people who already agree with us, and we're not really breaking out. What is your recommendation for people who want to love Fox News, as you all should, and watch all day, every day, or sign up for Fox Nation, which is terrific, but also want to make sure that you don't live life with these blinders where you end up almost sort of coming up with cartoonish caricatures of people who disagree.
Yeah, well, you only live with blinders on if you choose to live that way.
Right.
The one thing that I love, and people know that I brought with me no matter what network I work for, no matter what stage I'm on. I mean, last year I sat next to Chelsea Handler, this year I sat next to Clay Aiken. I think that having conversations with the other side, which is something that I really want to do, and for those that are behind Fox Nation, they know that that's my primary purpose, is having across the aisle conversations. We find that we have more in common than we have differences. We find that we're all Americans and we want what's best for this country. And then those that don't, they become outliers because it becomes apparent. So for me, when I'm working on a platform where we're formulating Fox Nation, which I hope you'll all be a part of, my primary thing is, yes, I want to talk to conservatives, but more so, I want to talk to liberals. That's why you saw I reached out to Kathy Griffin and I said, I want to do an interview with Kathy Griffin on Fox Nation. Not edited, uncut. I want us to have an honest conversation. We clearly disagree. You come after me on Twitter. Let's have not a gotcha, not a debating for $50,000 type of a thing, but a let's sit down and have an honest, open conversation like Chelsea Handler and I were able to do. And you saw her reaction. So all we can do, to me as conservatives, is we can put our hands out there and say, I want to have a conversation that's honest and open, and then it's up to them whether they're going to accept it or not. But I think we should keep making the effort.
Lahren, part of your moniker is millennial, right? So I think there's a lot of people, older generations of conservatives, who dump on our generation all the time. Some of that might be deserved. I think some of it's unfair. What do you think of the future of our movement with millennials who, based on polling, aren't terribly fond of the Republican Party, aren't terribly fond of the president? He has hardcore fans, of course, but in the aggregate, the trends could be concerning electorally.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing with millennials is that we absolutely deserve a lot of the, I guess, stuff that the older generation puts on us. But at the same time, I've looked at studies about what millennials believe in terms of things like socialism. There's a lot of support for socialism among millennials, but we did an episode about it on CRTV. A lot of millennials also, guess what, have trouble defining socialism and knowing who people like Mao Zedong or Pol Pot are. So I think we have an issue there. And what's also interesting about millennials is that if you ask them whether they support wealth redistribution for policies, funnily enough, support goes way down among millennials who are earning more than $40,000 a year. It's almost as if they don't want to have to pay their own money, they just want to be able to get other people's money. And so it's been, I guess, age-old truth that if you're young, you're going to be more liberal, but guess what? You age out of it. So right now, I think, looking at the millennial generation, it might be concerning, but are millennials still going to be as, I guess, liberal as they are in 20 years, 30 years? I think absolutely not. And we look at the generation that's after us, they're the most conservative generation in a long time. And I think what millennials have shown them with our overbearing need to be politically correct and inclusive to the point of authoritarianism is that it's actually now become counterculture and almost, dare I say, cool to be conservative among people who are in high school right now. If you want to be edgy, you don't talk about how it's so awesome to be PC and to have safe spaces. You talk about supporting people like Trump. You talk about meme warfare. You're on 4chan and poll. Like, that's what's edgy now. It's not. What you said is very important. That I want to take a chance for a lot of the conservatives in this room. By the way, I know that you're moderating this, but by show of hands, how many of you consider yourselves to be conservative? Or have conservative thought? So pretty much everyone in this room, so we're conservative. I think that when we talk about that, how it's become counterculture to be conservative, and that that's cool now, and I've talked a lot today about Kanye West and how he's making it cool to be a conservative, I caution that, because is it cool to be a conservative because of the values, or is it cool to be a conservative because Kanye puts on a mega hat and says it's a superhero cape? If the values don't follow with it, then that's just you being cool, but you're not going to go out and vote. You're just going to talk about it, and you're going to wear your mega hat, and you want to be edgy and conservative, and you want to piss people off. But if you're not going out to the polls, what you do on your Instagram selfie really doesn't matter.
Contrarianism versus ideas.
But if you actually look at what Gen Z is saying, they are the most likely to not drink. They're the most likely to abstain from things like sex until an older age, right? And I think it's part of the culture that we've grown up in with, as millennials. I think we've kind of taken some things to the point where we look ridiculous with all of our, I'm sorry, but hedonism. And I think a lot of the younger generation are saying well, that's what everyone's doing. It's no longer trendy to do that. I'm hoping that love for free market specifically follows that, but I guess in terms of social conservatism, I think we are seeing that among younger generation.
Cliff, you want to?
Yes, since the room is very conservative, let me just throw out two very clear warnings. I agree with Tomi 100%. It's got to be about the ideas. Okay, the left, many of the folks in this room that debate with the left, they don't like the emotion. We cannot fall for that same trap of it just being hip and cool to say that you're on the right. And the other thing, with a small L libertarian here, focus on the issues that young people care about. Do they trend towards socialism? You're right. When they hear the word, some polling will show that. But you know what else they trend towards? They want to keep the money they make. They don't want the government spying on them, and they want to get the government the hell out of their lives. Do whatever the hell you want, as long as it doesn't impact my life. Those are very libertarian philosophical principles. And so I'd urge conservatives, stick to the ideas, not the identity politics, and you're going to get people, you're going to win them over, and you're going to win them over long term that will actually have impact on the country.
Speaking of libertarians, how many libertarians do we have in the audience? Get your hands up. All right, there they are. Right, so there's lots of people out there that agree with us, right? Conservatism and libertarianism has a lot in common, but the ideologies tend to be distinct, right? Libertarians are split on the issues of abortion, for example. Libertarians are split sometimes even on foreign policy, for example. So we have our own internecine squabbles that are occurring within the Republican movement. I mean, within the Liberty movement or the broader conservative movement. As a matter of fact, we are going through something of an identity crisis. Donald Trump and his movement represent something entirely new. The old conservative establishment, the National Review Board, Weekly Standard types, the neoconservative establishment has really been washed out of power generally to a certain extent. And we're seeing a new broadening movement of paleoconservatives and old traditionalist conservatives that actually jive very well with libertarianism. I was having a conversation with Ben Shapiro about this earlier. He and I were both Trump skeptics. I literally tried to run against the guy in 2016. But because I'm the type of person who looks at things objectively and through evidence, I have to say that the president is accomplishing policy goals that I think are positive for our country. That's not what I'm going for. I'm not just throwing out red meat to the audience. If I did stuff like that, I could win an election. But you know, we do have to chart our way forward, guys, or we will be overcome by this populism. Because populism is a double-edged sword. I will tell you that. Anti-elitism at its core is not intellectualism. So what Cliff is saying about the ideas, I'm asking you, I'm doubling that out. I'm saying absorb some of the good ideas. Read some of the conservative economists and philosophers and enrich yourself, because that will make you a better warrior for conservative ideas. It'll make you a better warrior for libertarian ideas. And aren't most of the conservative economists actually libertarians anyway? Don't they get our best ideas from us, Cliff? I'm pretty sure they do, Milton Friedman and others. But I would ask you to consider that sometimes an idea that comes from someone who's an elite isn't necessarily the wrong idea, right? Sometimes 99% of people are actually wrong about something and a very small intellectual magnet are right. So don't get in your echo chambers. Be willing to go across the aisle, like we're saying. Talk to liberals, and don't be afraid of debate. And even if they call you literally worse than Hitler, oh my God, LOL.
Dan, you leaned in. You had something that you wanted to add here.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the great gifts from Andrew Breitbart was the line that politics is downstream of culture. And this is where I may present a bit of a contrarian review. I love the panelists here; they're all great. But I think the Kanye moment was important, and I'm not suggesting Tomi said otherwise. I'm not saying that at all. The reason is you have to remember, folks. Let's not mistake this fight for anything other than a street brawl right now.
Yeah.
Any of you in this audience who are under the impression that this is the JFK Democrat Party, remember JFK, the one who gave the speech about ironically high marginal tax rates? JFK gave that speech. Now, Ronald Reagan believed it, but JFK gave the speech, right? That's dead. We are in a street brawl now. These people on the far left, not all Democrats, I'm not demeaning them, don't take it the wrong, I'm talking about the radical left. These people think you are evil. They don't think your ideas are evil. They think you are evil. They personally hate you. I have seen it. I have seen it. Again, I'm not talking about the Democrat Party. I'm talking about the radical left. These people can't stand you, and they have hijacked the party due to gerrymandering and everything else. They have taken over the activist wing of the party. What I'm suggesting here is this is a culture brawl first before the politics ever come in. Listen, guys, I am with you on tax rates, economic freedom. I loved Capitalism and Freedom's my favorite book. Libertarian economics has it spot on. It's not that the government's too big, it's that it's too stupid. It can't do anything. Right. I get it. I understand that. The problem is, if we don't have people like Kanye, he's not a conservative, not even close. But if you don't have Kanye first, who has cultural capital, with people who respect him, saying first, Austin, Cliff, Tomi, Lahren, they're not crazy. The ideas come later. Because as long as they think we're all nuts on this panel, everything else is entirely bullshit. Nobody gives a damn about economics. They want to know you're not crazy. That's why Kanye is important.
So, on this point, though, because it's a tough one, if we accept the premise that this is a street brawl, where is the room then for persuasion? Because in a street brawl, you're not trying to persuade anyone. You're trying to punch people in the face, basically. But there's a lot of Americans who are not ideologues. They would hear us talking about a street brawl and be like, what are they talking about? I'm just living my life here in Nebraska and having a pretty good time, and the economy's getting better, so that's good. How do we confront the fact that there is a hard left that is really intensely detesting what we believe, without alienating a lot of people who are just sort of normal apolitical folks?
I know you want to answer too, so I want to make mine really brief. When we say we need street fighters, I agree. Because we need people like Brett Kavanaugh that are going to go out there and they're going to say, I am innocent and I'm going to fight back hard. But they're not going out there and antagonizing people or trying to go out there and act erratic. They're going out there saying, this is what I'm going to believe and I'm going to fight for it. That's why we love Donald Trump. Because where he is a street fighter, he's going to bat for the issues that we care about. So without the issues, you're an empty hat. Without the issues and without the things that you're really fighting for, if you're just fighting for yourself as an individual and your popularity and your fame, you're not helping the movement. You're not advancing the movement. You're not getting people out to the polls. You're saying, look at me, I'm counterculture. You need to have the ideas. When I think about someone like a street fighter, I think about people that stood up, like even Lindsey Graham, who I often criticize, stood up and said, this is BS. That to me is a street fighter. Not just someone who's going to say, I'm going to go against the left and I'm going to be on TMZ and I'm going to act erratic and get attention. That to me is not the definition of a street fighter.
Isn't it interesting that for about a week, like, the incredible heroes of the conservative movement were Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, and Mitch McConnell? I was like, and the thing is, do not mess with Cocaine Mitch. That guy will fight you. Sorry.
Well, I think you asked the question of where does the persuasion come into play. I think first we actually have to normalize the idea of dialogue and conservatism in general. Right now, unfortunately, we are at a point where that persuasion can't even happen because you can't even espouse these ideas without being called racist, bigot, hate speech. I am a half-Asian immigrant woman who has been called a white supremacist more times than I can count. So until we normalize these ideas, then no, we can't even talk about ideas. And you know what? Kanye West, he's no philosopher. He's not a political mastermind. After he came out and said what he said about the fact that you don't have to be a Democrat if you're African American, support for Trump among blacks and Hispanics has been growing, right? So we can't ignore the fact that, yes, politics is down to
West, though, or is that because the policy that was put in place by a tax reform are allowing people that are in those communities to see real gains in their communities?
Yeah, but I think how are we going to make that connection
to diminish the real accomplishments of this administration in people's pocketbooks by saying that somehow Kanye West increased the popularity of Donald Trump's ideas among the black community? To me, I find that condescending because I think that they're doing it in their communities. It's not, black people don't need Kanye West to tell them how to think just as much as they don't need anyone to tell them how to think. Tell them how to think because it's best for them, because it's best for all Americans. That's what I find so frustrating about this Kanye movement or whatever else it is. You can't sit there and say that Kanye West is a hero and so brave and then turn around and shit on Colin Kaepernick because you're doing the exact same thing. And if we try to do that, if we try to out-identity politics the left, we have lost ourselves and we might as well not call ourselves conservatives.
I read the other day, though, that if we tried to out-identity politics the left isn't going to like it because we're a majority white nation, and the last thing you want to do is to stoke the racist white people because that's the KKK, and these are the proto-fascists that do identify with some of these ideas. I've met some of these people who do find a fascination with the ideas of Mussolini and Hitler and others, and they think it's a joke. It's not a joke. We shouldn't be palling around with fascism. But the problem, of course, is that when I think of street fighters, I don't think of Kavanaugh or Lindsey Graham. I think of people like Gavin McInnes. And when I saw today that the National Review, our compassionate conservatives flagship, is calling for us to rout out Gavin McInnes, I have to wonder who's going to stand between you and the Antifa mobs, us and Ben Shapiro and the Antifa mobs when they show up. I mean, who was the congressman that was almost assassinated this year? Steve Scalise and Rand Paul. I mean, we're facing actual sincere threats of violence from the left. Because the problem is that conservatives, we think that liberals are wrong, but they think we're evil. When I say, they've ratcheted up to 11, right, we're dealing with people who are entirely irrational. So I'm not sure how to combat it, but the last thing that I want to do is do what the National Review says and get rid of some of our actual sincere street fighters, because those are the only people who are actually willing to stand up there and put a shield, base stick man, between us and some of these real violent mobs, and they are mobs.
Reason someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into, right? So up here, and people on the right in general, we can talk about how facts don't care about your feelings all you want, but there's a sizable proportion of the people in states and just in general that they do operate based on an emotional capacity. And to say that, oh, well, facts don't care about your feelings, look at these ideas, we need to, as conservatives, be better at making the compassionate and emotional argument for conservatism, because it exists, right? It exists. It is a moral good to have freedom, to have this independence, and it actually has fruits as well. But if we're gonna cut off entire things of the culture, no, we have to be able to talk about Thomas Sowell. Of course that's important, but we've been ignoring the culture war for far too long, and that's where the left has been making all of its gains. So finally, with people like President Trump, we're actually starting to gain a little bit of ground back. And I don't think we all have to be become Kanye West fans, but it's not identity politics to say, hey, if you're black, you don't have to be a Democrat. That's the opposite.
That's anti. Right?
Exactly.
That's anti-identity politics. So to bring it back to sort of one of the core issues of the panel, because Tomi, you mentioned Justice Kavanaugh. Justice Kavanaugh. And just a couple of the 5-4 decisions in recent years, Citizens United, First Amendment case, Hobby Lobby, First Amendment case, Heller, Second Amendment case, we were one vote away on the Supreme Court from really uprooting any semblance of what it means to have a Second Amendment right, to have religious freedom in this country. Is that part of the reason why you think the Kavanaugh fight was as ugly and bloody rhetorically as it was, because the stakes are high and the margin is so close?
That's directed to me?
Yes.
I absolutely do on the left. I think that's what they were putting up Dr. Ford and Avenatti's people, and they were putting up the rest of it because they wanted to make it about sexual assault and sexual misconduct, but in actuality it's because they're fearful of what they believe their right's going to be taken away by a conservative justice. So yes, that's why they were so fired up, and it's unfortunate they use sexual assault and misconduct as their pawn. And again, I think that's why conservatives got so angry, not even just because we want Justice Kavanaugh to be a justice, because we did, but we saw what happened to him and the way he was dragged through the mud, and we said this could happen to any one of us, this could happen to any son, any father, any brother, and at that point it could happen to any sister, any mother, and this could happen to any American. We watched him be dragged through the mud based on allegations, and that's what fired up the conservative base.
Dan, on the Kavanaugh fight, and I wrote about it a lot, I talked about it a lot, and the fact is I have absolutely no idea what did or did not happen 36 years ago in Maryland, right? There is a possibility that Dr. Ford is telling the absolute truth. There's a possibility she is making it up out of whole cloth. There's a possibility that something happened and it wasn't quite what she now says she remembers. We don't know, right? So it came down to, is there any threshold matching evidence available here that would allow us to come to some conclusion with the preponderance of evidence that this occurred? And I think to any rational person, the answer to that question is no. And yet, the public was split basically down the middle, with people saying, well, we believe this or we believe that, with sort of this question of the presumption of innocence and evidence-based decision-making up in the air. And that was the frightening thing that I saw, because it seemed like people were willing to let emotionalism some of it understandable, carry the day in a way that they were like, this is a bigger moment. It's not about him necessarily or his guilt or innocence. Well, yes, it is, right? That was the thing that has me more frightened than anything that I've seen in the last couple of years.
You know, for a generally fiery guy like I am, for those of you who were in that last panel, usually on Fox, I'm a little bit more reserved on cable news. Thank you. I can get spicy, but I rarely lose my emotions. And one of the few times it happened, Guy, was on an interview with Chris Hahn, who's a friend, but he's a liberal, and Chris and I are friends. But he said something about Kavanaugh that really got under my skin. And I think the reason the whole Kavanaugh case you're talking about and the evidence standard bothered me so much is the reason I'm a libertarian leaning, I hate the labels because it's really irrelevant. I have a bunch of positions on things. Is when you're a former federal agent, a police officer, and you take someone's freedom, right? How many cops are in here? Anyone? None.
One.
Wow, that's one.
Two.
Well, let me ask you something, right? One of the worst feelings of your life, right, no matter how bad the person you arrest is, some of you are going to know what I'm talking about. Most of you may not, thankfully. I'll never forget knocking on doors. You always serve restaurants at 5 in the morning because that's when everybody's home. And you wake them up, and you know who's also home at 5 in the morning? Their kids. And I don't care how bad these people were. When you pull that guy out of bed in front of his wife and you put those bracelets on him, if you have a scintilla of empathy in you, I don't care how bad this guy is, and you watch their kids cry, and their wife knowing this guy's life is over, when you're a federal agent showing up with the IRS, the FBI, and the Secret Service, trust me, you're done. Your goose is caught. You can't look at that kid crying and you can't and not have empathy. Why are these guys probably libertarians? I don't know. I know them. But I don't know them well enough to dig into their brains. But I'm going to guess, tell me if I'm wrong, that the biggest fear you have is the power of the government. They have a monopoly on force and a monopoly on power. You can't, ladies and gentlemen, all the liberals in the room, oh, we hate corporations, they're so evil. Listen, I've been screwed over by corporations my whole life. I could probably give you 20 examples. Comcast, I'm serious. Here's the difference. No, I'm serious. Just cancel it and go get Verizon. I bring all this up because the government is the way they abuse the government is such a frightening thing. The fact that we are now at an evidence standard, at least in the general populace, where everyone has to be, who believes every woman has to be believed? Raise your hand. All the time. You do, ma'am. Let me ask you a simple question. Are there any circumstances whatsoever where a woman is not to be believed? Any?
I don't think it's an and or.
Wait, no, I can't, no, folks, it isn't and or. It isn't it is a yes or no question. Folks, if the standard now to derail a Supreme Court justice, a father, a patriot, a dedicated public servant, if the standard to derail a man's entire career is every woman is to believe under every single condition, I ask you this very simple question. Under what conditions, if any, should someone not be believed? And I'll wrap it up. I'm sorry, I'm being a long-winded guy. But I'll leave you with this. This is the answer to the question. I would argue to you, under every condition that happened in the Kavanaugh case. No verification, no details, no corroboration, no timeline, no nothing. Folks, I'm sorry. Dr. Ford was treated respectfully. I never treated her disrespectfully. I used her title. More power to her. But if you are going to make charges like that against a man's life, he has every right to defend himself, and you have every right, and you should produce some evidence indicating this.
By the way, I think maybe a middle ground that we can agree upon is women who come forward with serious accusations should be taken seriously. That is different than automatically believed, right? I think these are two very different concepts. So treating someone with respect and taking the claim seriously, I'm for that. Automatically believing someone because they're a woman or a man, I'm not on that train. So.
Everyone should absolutely be taken seriously. And if we I agree with you 100, well said, 100%.
And then some people prove that they are not worthy of being taken seriously when their story completely implodes, like the gang rape woman, Avenatti's. client, right? So you seem like you were chomping at the bit to jump in.
I don't think so. Probably just sitting forward in my chair. It's a hot topic. The Kavanaugh hearings radicalized even me. Despite my deep disagreements with Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh, on the Fourth Amendment, if the Democrats and the liberals had made those confirmation hearings about his egregious views on the Patriot Act and privacy and the Fourth Amendment, I might not have decided to support the justice, because I hold those issues to be very dear to me. However, that is not what this is about. The Democrats made a gigantic tactical mistake by making this about the Me Too movement. And in Missouri, during the campaign last year, I met a lot of moms, a lot of homeschooling moms, mostly conservatives. I have about 50 kids, many of them. And many of them, they started these groups called Mama Bears. And the Mama Bears of Missouri are deeply...
50?
Yeah, they'll have a lot of kids. Branson, if you've never been. A lot of children. And many of these, they started these little groups, these little correspondence clubs called Mama Bears, moms of boys. And many of them are deeply concerned about what could happen to their boys. In an environment where, on a college campus, if two parties are both drunk, then that's still rape, but the man is the attacker and the woman is the victim. Right? When you are obsessed with race and sex, like the left is, and your identity is entirely caught up in something. This Kavanaugh hearing was not just an attack on a specific issue. This is an attack on women. So that's the problem with identity politics, is that you get balled up into a group. Not all black people agree with the Democratic Party, like Kanye West said. Not all women agree with the Me Too movement, such as it is. That's why identity politics is essentially a loser, because you can never, it's racist in the sense that you cannot attribute to all blacks the same qualities.
By the way, just as a political aside, having spent a lot of time in Missouri running that state, Claire McCaskill, is she going to win or is she going to lose?
It's very tight. There's a couple of independents in the race. I could not say whether she's going to win. She is a monster, a megalith of power. There will be $300 million spent on that U.S. Senate race, the most expensive in history. The tightest, the power of the Senate hangs in the balance. The Republican Party all lies on the Attorney General, Josh Hawley. So.
All right. I mean, that's a big
Good
one.
luck. Not my responsibility.
Before we start getting to some of the questions, I want to take a look inward a little bit at our own movement, such as it exists, because it's hard to quantify what exactly we are. I wonder if we all voted for different people for president. I think we're probably a little bit all over the map.
Ran for president, bitch.
We're center right.
I vote for myself.
Fair. Seems like I would hope so.
Yeah.
Right? Actually,
is this illegal?
Actually, Jill Stein looks interesting.
It's like Bobby Newport from Parks and Rec. You think you're supposed to vote for yourself.
One thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is, we do a lot of the talking about the closed-mindedness on the left, the snowflakes, the PC police, but it does seem like there is a certain growing strain on the right that does want to cordon itself off and cannot handle other viewpoints. And part of the argument that I get into this debate with fellow conservatives sometimes, where they say we have to recognize the tactics that they use and emulate them, right? Saul Alinsky 101, if they're doing it to us, we've got to give it right back to them, but harder, basically. And I think that makes for a very sad country and a very sort of depressing politics. How would you respond if you agree with me? And if you don't agree with me, why?
Don't agree, and I'll be very brief. Well, George Washington fought at Fort Duquesne, and they were fighting the Native Americans. And the Native Americans fought from the trees. They were guerrilla warriors. Look at the Viet Cong, and they defeated the United States. Look at the strategy of the Taliban. When you have these entrenched interests, they fight guerrilla warfare, and they don't fight fair. So I actually do think that we have to adopt some of the Alinskyite tactics.
Where do you draw the line?
Well, first of all, one of the things is satire, right? Like pick a target, polarize it, right, and make it, and I think that that's perfectly legitimate because that's being done against us, right? It's one of the reasons, why do we have nuclear weapons? Not because we're going to start an offensive nuclear war. It's because if anybody points a nuke at us, we're going to have that to, as backup, as self-defense. So I do believe that, in terms of a war, if you're painting things in the picture of a war here, war of ideas. And in some sense, yes, I do believe that it's perfectly legitimate to do things like that. You shouldn't break the law, but I think lampooning Hillary Clinton is perfectly fine. I think that some of the viciousness that's being directed back at us, these are again people who can't take a joke. The comedy goes one way, and so I love our comedians. Very few conservative or libertarian comedians that are out there, but those people are serving an important purpose as a spearhead.
So I agree that they serve a purpose. I would disagree with some of the tactics. Take campus, for instance. Okay, Run Young Americans for Liberty. We've had, so many cases over the last 2 years because it's so heated. It's just so emotional. And a lot of the tendencies of our students and anybody, when you get shut down, or when the liberal protesters are shutting down our speakers on campus, is we need to do this to the left. That's like, the mentality that we got to shut their speakers down. And that's the natural tendency. But we take a different approach at YL and we say, look, what are the policies that they're actually, how are they doing this? What is enabling the administrators on campus to do these things to shut conservatives down? And nobody wants to talk about this because this is in the weeds. It's not sexy. It's not sound bites. It's the policy. And so why, when we have a student group out handing out popular constitutions in Michigan, they arrest 3 of our students, they lock them up in jail overnight. But Bernie's group's out pushing for a 90% tax increase and nobody says a word.
Yeah, but we're going to fight, libertarian fight. Right? If you think that if Roger Stone hadn't done what Roger Stone does, that we would have a Trump presidency right now. Was that in our best interest to have Roger Stone out there?
Can we draw a fence though? Because, Guy, you and I both do Fox. You work there. I don't, but we do a lot of commentary. I've always admired your style. You have a very, I mean that, I'm not just saying that because you're on the stage. I don't kiss anybody's ass for no reason, but you have a great way of persuasion. That's your way, and there's certainly a role for that. I don't do that. You better kick that liberal's ass rhetorically in the debate. Right. Now, let me say that. I mean that, and I said own the libs always. Always own the libs. Now, things we should never emulate, ever. And this is why I think I say draw a fence around it. We should, what happened to Nancy Pelosi, I'm sorry, was a disgrace. We should not be doing that. There is no place for violence in our movement. If you really believe in big R God-given rights like a conservative or libertarian does, a liberal has those too. We do not chase people out of restaurants. We are not savages. Having said that, when it comes to ass-kicking in a debate, you damn well better take the gloves off. And I'll tell you why. The reason I debate the way I do is liberal arguments are pure bullshit 90% of the time. And when you let them get away with it, the argument turns into, it's not an argument at all. It's already an established premise. Let me give you just one quick example of what I mean. Whenever I'm on a debate and someone cites the Clinton surplus, this is like a wonkiest of all things. It drives me, I will never let anyone get away with it. There was no surplus. I will stop every debate. I'll be like, no, give me the statistics. Tell me 1 year, Bill Clinton, the national debt didn't go up. And why does it matter? That it's confrontational. They hate it. No, that's not the question, Dan. We were debating tax policy. No, I'm debating this now. Lib zero, whoever you are. You tell this Fox audience right now, tell me a year that the national debt did not go up under Bill Clinton. They can't because they're full of shit. There's no Clinton surplus. And you know what happens? Why does that matter? And again, I love your debate style, guy. Mine's a bit different.
I'm excited that you're so excited about surplus.
I know, I love it. But the reason I bring it up is because we will get emails in our account the next day from liberals who will swear to me they thought that shit was real. They'll be like, you're right. There really was no Clinton surplus. And that's why I think we fight hard in the debate. You own the libs in every debate. Go after them. Go after them.
Well, I mean, I think when we talk about like going hard, a lot of people have different definitions of it. I'm someone who I absolutely believe if someone's saying something that's not true, that you would disagree with, speak your mind always, call them out on their BS that they're saying. But at the same time, like you said, we do have conservative people on the right now who, when they look at people being chased out of the restaurants or people being doxxed, which when people release your personal information, if anyone doesn't know, there are people who say, yeah, let's do that too, let's fight dirty. And no, let's not fight dirty. I mean, because the people in the center, even the reasonable liberals, they look at those crazy left-wing radicals, and every time they act out, it takes away support for them. Every time Antifa riots, that's more support for the center right? And so, like, you know what? Go ahead. Chase people out of restaurants. Make that your movement. Support harassing people who disagree with you. It's
only going to push people further away from you. So that's the first reason why I disagree with it. The second reason why I disagree with it is because it's unchristian. We don't need any more, and we don't need another reason than that is wrong. And I mean, I don't like regardless of your beliefs, you need to be a Christian person conservative.
Yep. Tommy.
No, I agree with Dan, and don't get me wrong, I made my living on being very passionate. I'm not saying let's stoke down the passion. No, we need to turn up the passion. Own the libs. I'm a complete advocate for that. And I think we're all in the same place where it's like the mob mentality. We never want to assume that. The playing dirty, we never want to assume that. We can go out there and fight for our ideas from a point of passion, but there has to be values behind it. There has to be ideas behind it. Whether they're right or wrong, that's up for the public to decide. But we should come out full force, passionate, outspoken, unfiltered, authentic. But there's no reason for us to stoop to those levels.
And you got chased out of a restaurant. And I filleted those SOBs on Twitter that whole day. That was a disgrace what happened. And you handled it like you really did.
That's how we handle it.
God bless you.
The thing is when we've had so many conservatives being chased out of places or being attacked, and this happens on a routine basis now, and then it goes social media viral because people that are doing it are actually very proud of what they did. For me, I never wanted to discuss it because I don't want to give attention to people like that, but I was forced to because it went all over social media and it went viral, so I had to address it. But the way that we react to them when they do it really means everything. For me, could I go and scream in their faces and up the ante, and could I yell and do that? I could have, but I'm not going to do that because number one, I don't punch downwards. It doesn't do me any good to yell at a moron. And second of all, as conservatives, we don't need to do that. So us going out and having our own mobs is not going to be beneficial. Why would we do that? There are much better things and much better uses of our time.
Well, think about 4chan. It's a perfect example of an online mob that serves a very important function. Remember Shia LaBeouf when he was sane? He's not anymore because after his anti-Trump tirades and his "he will not divide us," we had the greatest game of capture the flag in human history, where some of you weirdos, non-normies, right? I went out there and triangulated the position of a flag and drove a man insane because you were able to do something like that. Those kinds of hijinks and pranks, I think, are perfectly legitimate.
All right. So let's start with some Q&A. So if I can just remind everyone, the definition of a question is one or two sentences ending in a question mark. No speeches, please. Sir, you're up.
Yes, just identity politics. Don't you think that quickly goes both ways? The way Donald Trump tries to get the agree, with his, fear tactics, fear mongering on a lot of things. I think that's most Americans will believe that. And talking about snowflakes, no disrespect, I know everyone in this room is going to boo me right now, but the last panel I was in, Ed Bongino left like a snowflake.
Yeah, but when the moderator tells you to go fuck yourself, you probably walk off the stage, dude. What, you ever been on a panel? Dude, you don't know shit. Get out of here. Sit down. Sit down. You don't know shit about me. Sit down. Loser. Beat it. Get the hell out of here. Snowflake my ass. Yeah, I do, because you're a loser, and I block losers. Matter of fact, I'm going to put my Twitter headline, if you're blocked, it's because you're a loser. So sit down. Wash your hair.
What about the question, though, does the president occasionally contribute to the problem? Because I think there's a fair case that sometimes he does.
Can we all admit that there are plenty of snowflakes on the right as well? As soon as you question the preconceived knowledge, right? There's political correctness on the left and patriotic correctness on the right. The soldiers died for my right to force you to stand for the flag. No, actually, that's not quite how that works, right? There's this concept of, we were talking about this yesterday, the civic nationalism, right, that sees the nation state as if that is the end. A nation state is only a means to an end. The end is individual liberty. And if the nation state gets in the way of individual liberty, we have the right to alter or abolish it. Our founding fathers weren't kind or nice. They got a 3% tax on tea and they shot the motherfuckers. So where is the spirit of rebellion in the United States? Yes, make liberty great again. How about that?
Hey, so I have a question about, in today's day and age, getting past people's pride when it comes to voting. For example, like First and Second Amendment, those are things I feel like are under the most threat. So when I try to talk to my liberal friends about why we should protect it, how do I talk to them in a way so it's like, it's not so split, like them thinking of it in a left way and not me thinking of it in a right way or whatever. Just so it's like, to let them know how important it is that this is a right that they're going to eliminate for themselves as well, And once you eliminate a right, it's hard to get that back.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on this. One way that I think is sometimes useful, especially for younger people when they're trying to engage in these types of debates on campus or elsewhere, is to, number one, start with the premise, and you have to be the one who brings this explicitly up first. Start with the premise that almost all of us want America to be better and to succeed, and we disagree on how to get there. So you sort of immediately neutralize the idea that one of you is the evil person. You can agree that we both love the country and want to improve it. That sort of brings down the temperature to start. And then one way that we recommend sometimes, my co-author Mary Catherine Ham and I talk about this a lot, you try to have 10 minutes. You sort of set a timer, literally 10 minutes, where you get to explain your views and ask questions of each other without ever questioning the other person's motive for why you believe it. So I think so many of our problems are rooted in the assumption that people believe things for bad reasons. And if you set a rule, even for 10 or 15 minutes, where we're not going to play that game at all, and I'm just going to explain myself, that at least creates a little bit of space for an actual conversation. And a lot of liberals who actually do fancy themselves open-minded will agree to those rules, at least at first. So that's one tip.
So you mentioned voters. This is something that kills me, okay? I'm going to piss off everybody in the room. You folks are at Politicon. You are not normal, and you are not a voter in the sense that you're the generic American voter, okay? Voters, when you're talking about conversations, and you're talking about issues, and we're talking about culture and different things at a very top level, most voters care about three things. They want safe neighborhoods, good schools, and they want you to fix the damn potholes. Okay, and this is honestly what we found when we go out there. Now, it's not sexy, and once again, it's not something that is, on the right, on the left, and we're trying to have these battles at the top level. When you talk to real voters, you got to figure out what are those issues they care about, and how is your philosophy, how is your proper role of government something that's going to connect with them, and that they should support your candidate. Something the left has done that nobody on the right talks about. Nobody, I'm like screaming it, nobody wants to talk about it because it's a long-term game, is focusing on the local level. The left, the Democrat Party, has mastered this over the last 30 years. They get people to run for local office, they organize locally, and they get out there and they work their ass off. Everybody in this room, you're going to leave Politicon, and what do? You go home, you go on Twitter, you're owning the libs, okay, but are you getting out and knocking doors? Are you getting out and voting? Are you getting out and talking to everyday voters and saying, you know what? Taxes are not necessarily a good thing. I don't want the damn government spying on me on my cell phone. So my push, if you're really talking about voters, normal people, and I don't want that to seem like I'm belittling voters. People are busy. They got a mortgage to pay. They got to put food on the table. They want to live their lives. I don't have time to listen to people like us on the stage. They care about the things that impact them. Figure out what they care about. But I'm telling you, you got to focus on the local level. And that goes to everybody in the room. That's where the left has just crushed the right over the past 30 years.
And if I can add, I think when you're trying to convince someone to come around to your way of thinking, it is so important to speak their language and frame things in ways that they care about. Right? So when it comes to the First Amendment, if you're talking to someone who, is perhaps a little bit more censorious, right? Talk about their right to protest Trump, their right to not have, Christians censor what they say because they find it offensive. Talking about the Second Amendment, what about the right for women to protect themselves from their attackers, right? Because there are conservative arguments to be made for literally, any position you could have. There's an emotional argument that could get a liberal out there. We need to be able to frame things in ways that relate to them. And it's possible, but it's just not necessarily what would persuade you if you were in their position.
And by the way, the goal at the onset of a conversation should not always be to try to convert the other person to think the way that you think, because then you're not really going to have a good, healthy conversation in most cases. It's a slow process of getting someone to start to change their mind and think about things differently. And unfortunately, we have this challenge on the right where a lot of people want to assume that we believe bad things for bad reasons. So just having the opportunity to explain ourselves without that demagoguery is like the first small but crucially important step. Let's get to the next question. Thanks for that question, dude.
Sorry, on the United States President. How are we going to get to the point where both parties are able to work together to solve issues such as like Social Security and unfunded pension liabilities that actually are going to affect people's lives? And it seems to me like, an example of Social Security, to me, you can have a compromise on both sides where you could raise the payroll cap like a little bit each year. We could also raise the retirement age a little bit each year. Like, no side get what they want, but at the end of the day, the problem gets solved. We don't have these crises down the road where
It seems like neither party is serious about
What we need to breed is what we need to do. I'm sorry, like if we care about stuff like Social Security, people need to start having kids.
Yeah.
Like
They're
that's
lying to me. I think the whole premise of Social Security is a financial disaster. It's an economic impossibility. Anyone in the audience who actually believes there's money in Social Security doesn't understand basic GAAP accounting. The only reason Social Security worked at all is because generations paid in while not taking benefits. Once the system was fully invested and people started, the baby boomers, it's totally, completely bankrupt. You know, this argument about Social Security is, well, I get your point. I get what you're saying. But this idea that we're going to constantly raise the retirement age to what, 107? There's no money. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pay-go system. And if we as conservatives can't make the argument to people, there's no money. Dude, listen to me. Yeah, people, I paid in. You paid into a lot of things. You paid into the unemployment insurance fund, but you have a job. You got screwed. Your government screwed you, but I paid in. You got screwed, bro. There's no money. It's a dead system. There's no money. Here's how you want to know how to fix it. You tell people, 55 or older, we're going to take care of it with the tax system because that's what it is now. This payroll tax thing's total bullshit, right? But 55 and younger, it's over, Johnny. There's no money. Figure it out. Am I right or am I? There's no money? This is
You're right, but here's the thing. You mentioned both parties working together. They're already working together. Yes. Doesn't matter who's in charge. They've been raising the budget caps. They spend all of our money every single year. Yes. And so you want to really hold the Republicans accountable to being conservative? Yes. Don't expect it out of Paul Ryan or the Republican leadership. I mean, come on. That's the problem. It's not that the parties have to work together. They've been working together for the past 50 years. We need a new idea of actually limiting government. That's the only way you solve it. There you go.
Next question.
Hi there, my name is Eric. I live in LA and I go to school. I went to school. I went to inner city school. I work in inner city. My question is about Kanye. People don't think that he's significant. Working in the inner city, I think he is significant. So my question to you, although I don't really follow Kanye or anything, but I think for Black voters and Latino voters, they look up to him. So how significant do you think he is for the 2020 election?
All right, so I probably have more of his music memorized than anybody here on the stage. I've actually been a huge Kanye West fan for years.
That is quite presumptuous, sir.
That's how it goes for the douchebags.
No, I don't know his lyrics. Go.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I actually think it is very important. I think that when we're talking about the culture wars and we're talking about being culturally active, what Kanye is doing is very critically important. Because I do know, I lived in New York City for a number of years. I know people, they identify with him. I actually think what he and his wife, Kim Kardashian, are doing are actually very important as a civil libertarian. Because Kim Kardashian came into the White House and asked for a woman to be released who had an egregious prison sentence for marijuana, an old woman. And the president pardoned her. What a civil liberty win for all of us. And if Kim Kardashian and Kanye West are now actually advancing civil liberties in this country, I'm not going to laugh or chide at them or make jokes. I'm going to praise them because I think what they're doing is actually very important work. The president went to the football men who took the knee and said, give me a list of the people that you think that I should pardon. How many of those people came back and said that they had a list of people for the president to pardon? I don't remember a single one. So it wasn't about protesting criminal justice reform. It was about protesting the president. So that's why I think the left is so disingenuous on this issue, because what Kanye and Kim are doing are civil libertarian issues. They're true liberals in that sense, right? So I heap great praise on Kanye. Don't tread on me, when I met Dennis Rodman yesterday, I told him very briefly that when I saw it, I cried actually with him when he was on CNN talking about moving forward with peace deals with North Korea. If we have to live in this bonkers, bizarre world, I'll take the pretty much damn near best timeline. Maybe if I had been president, it would have been the best timeline. but we're living in a very good timeline, and I think we shouldn't look down on Kanye. I think his cultural impact is significant and important.
So last word here to Tomi, because I know there might be a slight disagreement. Is there a way for conservatives to not hitch our wagons to Kanye West, not do the whole celebrity obsession thing of the left, but also appreciate what he's doing for a lot of people, which is giving them a very high-profile permission slip to think for themselves.
You know, the idea behind it, the messaging behind it, that you don't have to think the way other people want you to think, is positive. But when you attach yourself to a person and you say that him and Kim are going to be saviors of the United States, not only does that terrify me to my core, but I think, were you saying the same thing back when he said that President Bush hates black people? I mean, in the next 6 months, if he says something erratic, I think we can all agree he's erratic. So in the next 6 months, if he says something and he says, you know what, I changed my mind, fuck Trump, okay? Then are we going to sit there and say, what he did was so powerful and he's the leader of our movement? No, what he says is powerful is think for yourself. That shouldn't be attached to Kanye or anyone else. It just should be a message that we all hold dear to us. But is he the message of the conservative movement?
Don't ascribe Kanye just to Trump here, because if you have actually read what Kanye is writing on Twitter, he is off the reservation. He wrote decentralized, period, which at its heart is the basis for libertarian economic theory. Decentralization. Kanye is getting woke AF. So he can say whatever he wants in 6 months. But he's waking people up.
Tomi, Lahren, Dan, Cliff, Austin, guys, please thank them.